Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Deal. We are sitting here February 16th, Sunday afternoon, talking about the college football playoffs. This is my first official of the offseason college football playoff prediction. Y'all let it fly in the comments section, right? We haven't seen spring practice. We haven't seen what the spring transfer portal is going to look like. No doubt this is going to look different when we redo it in the summer. As we sit right now heading into spring practice, what does the college football playoff picture look like? This is my prediction. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I know damn well you got some problems with this one. Let's start with the conference champions. We'll start with my number one seed, the Oregon Ducks. Same pick as last year, Dill. I'll sell you real quick. Give me a 45-second elevator pitch on the Oregon Ducks. It starts with Dan Lanning's opportunity to really get his high school kids going. One of the narratives I've been seeing on Twitter is Dan Lanning and this Oregon staff can't recruit and develop out of the high school ranks, too reliant on the transfer portal. Well, look, they've recruited top 5 classes the last couple of years. He hasn't been there long enough to really criticize player development. But this year in 2025, this is the year that you want to see some of these kids that Oregon recruited out of the high school ranks become difference makers for Oregon. They supplement it really well in the transfer portal. And I think on top of it all, Dill, I think Dante Moore, that it's not crazy to argue that he's going to be an upgrade from Dylan Gabriel in terms of the ceiling he can provide for Oregon. Now, it might be a little bit more of a roller coaster, right? Dylan Gabriel, pretty damn consistent. There's things Dante Moore can do with the football as a thrower that Dylan Gabriel couldn't do. Push the ball down the field, work the ball to the boundary. If you get Dante Moore to reach his ceiling, if you get some of these kids at the high school ranks, I'm talking about Aiden Breland or a guy like Elijah Rushing to step up and become difference makers, this Oregon team, no doubt, can win the Big Ten and be the number one seed in the college football playoffs.
And this is the year I think we kind of see whether Dan Lanning's blueprint is going to work. Because I think you're right. Like, you look, when you hit the portal as hard as they do, there have been some clear weaknesses in the past couple of years, in my opinion. Like this year in the secondary, like in that Ohio State game, you just saw some guys who simply aren't good enough to be playing at national championship level football, game in and game out. In the previous year, you saw it on the defensive line. So again, like this year, now you get to see if Dan Lanning can put together teams like Ohio State where you just don't see position groups that kind of look out of place. And I think he can do it, because I think you're right. Like, that narrative that he can't develop guys is like ridiculous, because this is the first year he's kind of even got a chance to have upperclassmen that are his guys, if you will. So I think they did a better job, frankly, of addressing their questions in the portal than that Big Four in the Big Ten, like the Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Like, those 3 teams still have some questions bigger questions, if you will, than what I think Oregon.
That's also what it comes down to. And I probably should, sorry to interrupt you. Like, part of the reason I like Oregon coming in at number 1 here is because I think you do still have some question marks about the other teams in the Big Ten. And we're going to get to those teams in a little bit, but I think Oregon, like you said, probably did the best job in the transfer portal addressing those question marks. Number 2, Texas. This is another one of those where you just look at Coach Sark in Texas and where they're going, and it's just like better year after year after year. They are stacking a ton of talent at the high school ranks. Didn't really use the transfer portal all that much because they didn't really have to. Dill, I look at Texas, but I also look at the rest of the teams in the SEC. Specifically teams like Georgia and Alabama, where I don't even have Alabama in the playoffs. And then I look at Georgia, they're coming in at number 6, and I think Georgia fans would agree with this too. There are some pretty big questions we need to get answered from Georgia. Look at Texas. Yeah, they might have some question marks, maybe on the inside of the defensive line, but you also have arguably some of the best quarterback play. If you get that from Arch Manning in 2025, which I'm confident you will get that, if you get that, you're looking at what I think is probably the best football team in the country going into the 2025.
Yeah, the only issue I would have had is I have Texas 1. I do look at Texas right now as the best team in the country. Again, my one question is who's going to be that like game wrecker in the middle. I think they did enough in the portal to like have a good solid crew, if you will. But who's going to be your Alfred Collins or your Vernell Broughton? Even he was playing at that type, or Vernon Broughton, I should say.
Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat from 2 years.
Exactly, like those guys were playing at that like level where they were first round like level players almost. Like, who's going to be that guy? Because I look, Travis Shaw is like the interesting one, a really, really talented player. wildly inconsistent, it felt like, at UNC. And then Alex January, like, can he step up and be that guy? But I think if they're going to really be a juggernaut this year, they need somebody in the middle to be not just good, because like Cole Brevard's good. Hiro Kano, I think, is going to be good, but who's going to be a monster?
Yeah,
Who's
you probably throw Justice Terry in that conversation too as a true freshman. I don't know if they'll have that elite. I don't know if they have a Byron Murphy on the middle of the defense.
they'll have it on the edge, so that
That's
is
what.
one good thing to have going. But like that probably is my one question. But everywhere else, Texas is so good. I think they're probably the best.
Yeah, is Colin Simmons the best edge rusher in the country? Maybe him and Dylan Stewart. That's kind of where you're talking about with Colin Simmons. Number 3, Clemson. I'm buying so much that, and it's not just winning the ACC championship. I think this team can be legitimately dangerous in the college football playoffs. Nobody wants to talk about it. Cade Klubnik played. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the country in 2024, especially what you saw in that playoff game against Texas. I mean, he was dicing Texas secondary up, which was a very, very good unit. The offense is going to be very good. They return 4 out of their 5 offensive linemen. They have elite pass catchers around Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik's going into year 3 with the Garrett Riley offense. The big question mark is, how good is this defense going to be? And what makes me optimistic about it is, look, 12 months ago, I said Clemson was going to have one of the best defenses in the country. Wes Goodwin made me look like an idiot. I still feel like Clemson's depth chart on defense is still one of the better units that you'll see in the country. Can Tom Allen get them playing like that unit? Because if he does, I think you're looking at a top 10 offense in the country. I think you could be looking at a top 10 defense in the country. You get that for Clemson going into 2025. This is not only an ACC championship team. This is a dangerous team in the college football playoffs.
And that's why the Tom Allen hire, I think we just did our like rankings, the most important coordinator hires. Like Tom Allen is that guy, because Wes Goodwin failed that team. Like that defense was far too talented to play the way they did. Like they have 2 first-rounders on the defensive line, and TJ Parker and Peter Woods. Like those guys are absolute game wreckers. I look at the secondary, it's kind of young, but I like the talent there. And then the linebacker room it's good too, with Sammy Brown and some other young guys. So that defense was great last year, like talented wise, great.
Yes.
They played really poorly for that talent level. That's why I think like you bring in Tom Allen, and that's probably the difference I have in Miami versus Clemson is I just probably have more faith right now in Tom Allen making this defense like a top 10 unit than I probably do with Corey Heatherman at Miami. Because frankly, both teams are kind of in the same situation where you feel really good about your offense. Is the defense going to be up to snuff? I just think Tom Allen gets that team going a little quicker probably than Corey Heatherman.
Talk about an underperformance. This just tells you where my brain is during the offseason. I was sitting there one night, and I was counting how many Clemson front 7 defenders I thought were going to play in the NFL at some point during their career from that team in 2024. It was 8. It was 8. It was 8 names, and they were outside of the top 80 against the run.
I probably should have thrown Capehart in there as like another first-round talent because he's a monster. So.
And I'll tell you what, they have a true freshman by the name of Amari Adams that's going to be a dog for Clemson year 1. The team's really, really freaking good. Texas Tech at 4. Them in Arizona State. You could argue with. I went Texas Tech. I give Arizona. This is my logic behind this. Arizona State gets the check mark at quarterback. I think Sam Levitt's a legit dude. Line of scrimmage play. I think Texas Tech gets the big advantage, and I think line of scrimmage play in the Big 12 conference is a massive separator. And the Utah is not the Utah we remember in the Pac-12. And so I give Texas Tech the edge because of the line of scrimmage play. They seem and feel like Ole Miss. And you said this before we went live. Coach McGuire knew that Texas Tech had a really good nucleus and said, if we push our chips in the portal and just go out and make some really big additions, we can be a really good team. I don't know if it's national champion. In fact, I don't think it's national championship caliber, but it's certainly Big 12 championship caliber. Fire me up for Texas Tech in 2025 because they got the roster to do so.
And they corrected the spots that just probably weren't good enough. Like that secondary wasn't a great unit. I didn't think. You go out and you grab a really good corner in Bryce Pollock, and then you look at the defensive line, offensive line, like units that typically separated Texas Tech from teams like LSU or Florida, like those type teams. Like they usually just look a little different. I mean, Texas Tech went out and grabbed guys that I think those type of teams would have wanted really bad, like Hunter and those type of guys, and the offensive tackles they were getting. Like that to me is why Texas Tech feels like they're probably the team in the Big 12. And it's mainly because I know I maybe don't know what like Baron Morton can be, but I think Joey Maguire knows it, and I think he knew the guys on that team right there, like what you said, like can be really good if they just create something around them. Now, I don't know that it's going to be wildly sustainable in the future to be that way, but they're going to take their swing. I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way I describe it. Is like I don't know if you can do that every single year if you're Texas Tech, but when you got an opportunity, go do it and go try to do something special. I'm fully on board with what Texas Tech did.
In like Arizona State still feels like a team right now that probably needs to be more aggressive in the portal year in and year out because they don't recruit super high level high school class. Like again, I like where Dillingham's taking this team. He does a good job developing them, but they just don't feel like they're going to have the talent.
You're making it an anti-Arizona State thing. It is certainly not an
It's a little
anti-Arizona
bit.
State. No, it's not. It's just a pro Texas Tech thing. I was really tired. I had Dill at one point during this graphic. I promise you this. I had Arizona State at 4. Deleted the logo. Went with Texas Tech. I love what Kenny Dillingham's doing. I'm very high on what Arizona State can be. I think Texas Tech did enough for me to get them the nod in the Big 12. Number 5, Penn State. I'll give you 30-second elevator pitch. I know you're going to lay into me on this one.
I don't see how they're not.
You didn't even give me my 30 seconds. Give me my 30-second elevator pitch. That's crazy. All right. James Franklin does not win big football games. I get that. You have, I think, the best coordinator duo in the country here with Coach Koldenicki and Jim Knowles. James Franklin has made the moves in the offseason, specifically with this coaching staff, to try to get Penn State over the hump. And if Drew takes a step going into 2025, of which he took a step going into 2024, I could see this Penn State team being very, very good. Now, do you have some question marks? Yes. Is Drew going to be the guy in the big moments, a.k.a. also James Franklin? Do they have enough talent around Drew, which is probably my biggest concern? And then how do you replace Abdul Carter?
Now, the problem is you pretty much know they don't have enough talent at the wide receiver and pass catcher spot unless Luke Reynolds comes out and is just like an absolute unicorn.
But even if he is Tyler Warren, even if he does replace Tyler Warren, it still wasn't good enough.
And that's what frustrates me about like Penn State. Okay, they go out, they get really good coaches. They go like this wide receiver room still is not good enough to be really, really competitive at the highest levels. I don't feel like you can't have wideouts who caught 0 passes in a playoff game. Like that's just so unacceptable. And it doesn't really feel like they went out and got guys who are going to change that a whole lot. Like Kyron Hudson's been a role player for most of his career. He's been bouncing around a fair amount. Like he just doesn't feel like that guy. And the fact that they're going to come into this season with a defense that I don't see how it matches exactly what they did last year because of how talented it was with guys like Carter and that defense was so loaded last year, and it's going to be a really good unit still. But is it going to be like a top 3 unit? I don't know about that, and I just think I'm not really sure their offense doesn't take a bit of a step back because
what if Penn State goes and makes a massive addition at the wide receiver position?
Oh yeah, that changes things 100%. But like nothing about what Penn State's done the last 2 years makes me think they're about to go do that. So I don't know.
Well, what do you mean? You just saw Penn State go out and land Jim Knowles from Ohio State.
There are so many really good wide receivers in the portal. You're telling me you couldn't have gotten one of them? Like
they were in the playoffs. You said the same thing for Michigan 12 months ago. They were in the playoffs. They weren't focusing on the wide receivers. I think in the spring, when you're not battling it out in the playoffs, maybe you're a little bit more ready to go address your weaknesses. We'll see. I'm not exactly banging the table for Penn State.
I just think they should probably be more of like a 9, 10, 11 bubble team than like penciling in the team in.
That's fair. And Georgia, to me, seems a little bit high too, right?
It's tough to have them, frankly, over Notre Dame. I mean, I look at Notre Dame. I think you pencil them in at 5. I think they're loaded. I look at that as a team that are going to return a lot of players on the defensive side of the ball, a really good core nucleus. I think they addressed probably the 2 positions I would have wanted to see them address, which is the wideout spot and the defensive tackle spot. I don't really have a ton of questions, frankly, about Notre Dame. Maybe the quarterback, but the fact that they didn't even kick the tires on anyone doesn't make you think they're probably good there.
I do agree with that. And if CJ Carr / Steve Angeli / Minshew, whoever wins the job, I think it'll be Carr or Angeli. Here's another X factor. What if that allows Mike Denbrock to kind of get into his offense a little bit more? Because that wasn't exactly the Mike Denbrock offense that you saw at LSU because Riley Leonard was the passer that Daniels was.
What if they didn't have the wideout play? Like again, Jaden Greathouse kind of emerging. You bring in a couple really good portal guys. Like I don't know. I think this team could be like really good this year.
Yeah, that's fair. I had them at 7 just because I had some having Notre Dame over Georgia is probably I regret doing that now because it's
That's
like
just
Notre
you.
Dame being
That's
head
just
up.
you being stuck 3 years ago. I feel like in
Yeah,
Georgia,
because
like
you look at Georgia and say it's just not. And Georgia fans, I'd love to hear y'all's take on this. It just doesn't feel like the same Georgia team that we are used to talking about in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, where they just roll out a team that is overwhelmingly dominant along the lines of scrimmage, can control the tempo of each game they play because of that, especially on the offensive line. And with a question mark at quarterback, I think you are going to get worse quarterback play than you did with Carson Beck, right? You think Gunnar Stockton or Puglisi come in and play better than Carson Beck did?
he played very poorly, I thought last year. But that's besides the point. I think you're right. At the end of the
It's
day, a Georgia offense that doesn't have a good offensive line doesn't really scare me, and I don't see how that unit really takes much of a jump right now because like you're going to lose a couple of really good players like Ratledge and Wilson especially. I think those guys are great, and Xavier
Fairchild
Smith
too
is
is really
solid
good.
as
I mean,
well.
it's
What do you have coming to replace that and be better than what you were last year? Because frankly, it wasn't even
wasn't good
close to being
enough.
good enough.
Yeah. Here's the for Georgia fans who just had to deal with the last 2 minutes of us asking questions. Here's the potential answers.
Kirby Smart.
Yeah. Kirby Smart. It starts with yes, it starts with Kirby Smart. It starts with how well you've recruited the defensive side of the football and how much talent you have stockpiled away. Then it's hey, what if Zachariah Branch becomes the guy we thought he was after his true freshman year? What if Noah Thomas takes another step in the right direction? What if Lawson Lucky can be a difference maker tight end that I think he can be in 2025? There are plenty of answers that you have with Georgia too. There's just more questions than we're used to having with the
I
Georgia
just don't.
Bulldogs.
When can you think of a time you thought of a Georgia offensive line and been like, this feels like it can legitimately be kind of a weak unit? Like
Yeah,
it's just not been the case too much.
I agree with that. What are we? We talked 7. All right, let's talk 8. This is probably one of the hottest takes I have. That's Ohio State. And here's look, I have them making the playoffs, and I fully know that they're going to be one of the most talented teams in all of college football in 2025. What made one of the reasons, though, what I think made Ohio State so good in 2024 was the continuity. And yeah, the national media talked about the transfer portal additions, Caleb Downs or true freshman additions and Jeremiah Smith and Will Howard and Judkins. The bulk of that team had played a lot of football together over the last couple of years, and they kind of all put it together. Now it's you replacing so many guys that have played so much football for Ohio State. You're replacing both of your coordinators, and both of which I think are really, really good in Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles. I know Ohio State has recruited well. We cover recruiting all spring, all summer. We know they have the talent. Is the continuity both within the coaching staff and the personnel going to be a problem for Ohio State? I think it might be a little bit. That's why I have them coming at 8. Now I'll say this, very similar to what we saw. I believe Ohio State was 8 last year as well in the seeding. What if it all comes together in the playoffs? Like, okay, we're going through some growing pains. We got a redshirt freshman or sophomore quarterback in Julian Sayin, where we're kind of breaking in a new offensive line. We have some new players on defense. Maybe you see some growing pains and they drop 1 or 2 games. What happens if it all comes together in the playoffs? You certainly could see a team that contends for national
Yeah,
championship.
but I just don't look at like is their top end like what it was? Is it going to be close to what it was last year? I feel like people like don't give
Yes,
the respect to like what that defensive line was and like
that's fair.
how good JTT and Jack Sawyer and Tylee Williams and Hamilton like those guys when they turned it on and they
Yeah.
turned it on at the end of the year. That was a unit that was playing like, yeah, you can't really beat this team. Like, are they going to be able to put that out there? Is the court like are they going to have running backs who can do what Judkins and Travion were doing in big moments? Like, are they going to have
Yeah.
that top end ability at those positions? I know they'll have it at the wideout spot. Like, they're going to be
The thing is, you talk about top end. Now you arguably have the 2 best players, the best player on offense in the country, Jeremiah Smith, and then maybe the best player on defense in the country in Caleb Downs. But is there enough top end talent?
I look like the top end where you need it. Like, I think when you want to be a really dominant defense,
Where
you
do you
need
need it?
top end
Defensive line?
defensive line play. I
Yeah.
don't know that they're going to be. I just don't see how you can be what you were last year because that unit was unbelievable. Like JTT started to play like a top 10 draft. Like he didn't
Yeah.
play like that for his whole career.
I would say
He
Jack
was
Sawyer
hungry.
more. Yeah.
Both
Yeah, both of them. LSU 9. This is one of those teams that I just have a lot of confidence in is going to be really solid. Are they good enough to win a national championship, specifically on defenses? But Dill, like how many quarterbacks off this list right here do you trust more than Garrett Nussmeier? Not many, I don't think. I think Joe Sloan does a great job with the offense. I think the offense is going to be really good, especially with the additions of Barry and Brown and Nick Anderson. They low key massively upgraded the pass catcher position than what it was. We all thought it'd be pretty solid, even though they had to replace Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. It was not nearly what I think LSU fans thought it was going to be. I think it can be really good this year with Nuss. Then on defense, it's year 2 under Coach Baker is exciting, right? Year 2 defensive coordinators always take a step in the right direction. And then I think they've gotten the personnel closer to where it needs to be. Now, is it fully there? We'll probably find out. And if it is, like you're talking LSU national championship contender, you probably still have some question marks at specific positions, but it's the best defense from a personnel standpoint that LSU's had in a very long time, which makes this LSU team very dangerous in the
Yeah,
playoffs.
and I think it starts. I think they finally have a secondary that you don't look at and have like almost like shudder and fear a little bit. Like, God, how are we going to play good enough defense in the back end? Because that's kind of been where they've
That's what it
been.
was last year.
Their secondary has just been so bad. I think their defensive line, like that's a sneaky unit that I really kind of like. I thought the 2 additions in the portal with guys like Pyburn and Butler, like really good, solid, tough defensive ends. Now, the middle of the defense certainly have a little bit of questions, but they have 2 really young players who are playing as true freshmen in Ahmad Bro and McKinley Jackson, who I think both can, or did I get Dominic
Dominic
McKinley?
McKinley. Yeah.
I'll always get that
Yeah.
confused with McKinley Jackson from A&M. But Dominic McKinley and Ahmad Bro, I think like you get really good year 2 jumps from them. I look at this LSU team fundamentally differently, and then I look, they're probably not like 9, they're probably closer to like 5 or 6.
Number 10, Florida. The question
They
for
got the
me
team,
here,
and they got the blueprint that has worked for, frankly, 2 teams in the past 2 years, in Ohio State and Michigan, where they're just returning pretty much their entire teams, especially
yeah,
on both sides of the line of scrimmage. My question is Billy Napier a good enough coach to get this team like playing week in and week out
is
good enough
is
football?
the
Because last
consistent.
year they had it, but like
Yeah.
they had it at the first or the back end of the season. The first part was like, ooh, we're watching like a G5 level team right now.
So that's what it is with Florida. That what we saw from them in November was a college football playoff caliber team. DJ Lagway takes a step going into year 2. You return 4 to your 5 offensive linemen. You have a defense that I think is extremely talented of guys that played really good too. It's not just me projecting. It's like we saw them play good football. Now it's 12 games of a regular season. Can we play consistent enough football and can we play top end enough football to be a college football playoff team?
Well, the thing is, I think there's no doubt they have the top end because DJ
Yes,
Lagway is like such a difference maker in
all
my
about the
mind, especially as
consistency.
he started to take care of the ball better. It's like, man, this guy's just like a unique talent. So I know they kind of, or at least in my opinion, I think I know they have the top end. It's do they have the weekend? Like, are they not going to have their snafus that you've seen them have too often under Billy?
And quite frankly, I think you can say the same thing for number 11 Miami Hurricanes, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that last year it was, I think, a playoff caliber roster. Now going into 2025, you lose Cam Ward, but you replace him with Carson Beck, and I think that's a brilliant fit. You know what? Carson Beck's really good when he has a good run game and can work play action. Miami's going to be able to run the football a lot, especially in the ACC. You completely revamp the personnel problem you had in 2024, which was the secondary. You bring in a new defensive coordinator. This is a playoff caliber team. Can they play consistent enough through 12 games of a season to go make the playoffs? That's the question mark you have with the Miami Hurricanes. Number 12 UNLV deal, Dan Mullen. I love Anthony Calandria, especially with Dan Mullen. Like he might be one of the better G5 quarterbacks you see in the country. And UNLV did a sneaky, really good job in the portal, bringing in some P4 level line of scrimmage play. You could have Boise State in there. I have big time question marks about replacing Ashton
Yeah.
Genty
What do you
because
do without Jet?
I haven't seen a team be so reliant on one football player, and maybe back to Cam Newton at Auburn. Like that might be it. So I have question marks about Boise State. I like Dan Mullen and UNLV. Yeah, I want to talk about the 2 teams that I have on this graphic that I just didn't put in the playoffs yet, and I'll address both of them. I'll tell you my question marks and why I don't have them in the playoffs, and then I'm sure you have some arguments here. Michigan, number 1. The question is very obvious. Is Bryce Underwood going to be consistent and good enough as a true freshman to make the college football playoffs? If he is, and if Bryce Underwood comes in and plays like a very good freshman and Michigan significantly upgrades the quarterback spot, this team makes the playoffs. South Carolina, it's just the defensive line specifically on the inside. Depth and talent. You lose some really good players, guys like Tonka, TJ Sanders on the inside, and they go out and land a guy like Gabriel Brown-Ladindi and have a guy like Xavier Hardy coming in from JUCO. You don't realize how, I think South Carolina fans realize this. The South Carolina defense was legit, and it was legit because of this defensive line. You have the edge rushers. Dylan Stewart's still there. Do you have enough talent and depth on the inside of the defensive line? And what do you look like at off-ball linebackers? The two glaring question marks I have for South Carolina. The rest of this team, I think I'm really, really high on. Would you put Michigan or South Carolina right now into the playoffs? And you got to tell me who you're taking off the list.
It'd be hard to knock anyone off. I think if you listen to that last 25 minutes or however long we've been going, my lean would probably be to knock out Penn State because I have some very big questions about what they're going to be able to do on the offense side of the ball. Like, I'm not totally ready to put Michigan in there yet right now.
Me neither. I
For
wanted
the same reason. It's like, I don't know that they did enough to address the skill players around that quarterback spot.
Yeah.
So I look like if they had really good skill talent, I'd be like, oh, probably even at worst, if Mikey Keene is the starter, they can probably go make a playoff spot because their defense is going to be good enough. But they just don't have real difference makers, it feels like, on the outside.
Yep.
And with that, I'm not sure Mikey Keene. So you kind of set your floor with Mikey Keene in my eyes. Like Bryce Underwood, he's like the North Star. Like you want him to be the guy. But I don't have enough confidence that if Bryce Underwood's not totally ready to go and be a really high.
I think Bryce Underwood's going to play. It's just that it's the question mark.
No, yeah. But how is he going to be like? Is he going to be? Because I think Michigan probably needs really.
How amazing does he need him? How
I think when you don't have a great skilled players around him, I think you need to be really quite good. Like
but
JJ
you will have
really,
a run game. I think a pretty significantly good run game. Plus,
yeah, but I don't buy that you can just run your way to the playoffs. Like you at some point,
I agree with that.
Trust your quarterback to play and make high level throws. Is Bryce Underwood can be that guy that early with a skill group that I just don't think is particularly great.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if Michigan addresses that. And then South Carolina, are they like outside looking in for you too?
I maybe would have them in over LSU because I think there are some spots that you have questions about both teams.
They play each other, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's early October, maybe week 5, week 6, something.
They go to Baton Rouge though.
That is true. Baton Rouge, you don't like going to Death Valley, but I do look. I think Lenora Sellers is one of those guys that is just has the chance, especially when you don't have a great defensive line against them, where they can't get him on the ground, like what you saw with A&M at times last year in some other moments. When you have that type of special player at quarterback, you can be a problem. And then Garrett Nussmeier, I know you're a big fan of Garrett Nussmeier. I probably want to see a little bit more. I think there felt like some games last year where he just took too many sacks and was doing some things that veteran quarterbacks shouldn't be doing. I like his game, but is he top end really great?
No, I don't think so, but I think you have enough around him to
that could be true.
Now that
their offensive line going to be are they going to have good enough tackles this year and to protect him and because he's not really much of an escaper. They're really tight. I think, frankly, Michigan, Ohio State.
You're just copping out. Just going to sit on the fence here. Or are you going to make a call? LSU, South Carolina.
Give me South Carolina. I think they got the better quarterback. I think they got
that's what they call you. They call you fence sitter Dill in the comment section. Just playing. All right. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.